Your dismissive attitude towards Boobs is the fourth episode of the third season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in the episode. I'll go through things chronologically and share some thoughts along the way. And it's a pretty good episode. I did enjoy it. I thought Berta was brilliant, as is usually the case when Berta's involved. It starts off with Jake in the kitchen and he's telling Alan he's masticating. Obviously, he's just learned what that word means, and it unlocked a memory that I had forgotten about. I used to have a biology teacher who used to tell people to stop masticating if they were chewing gum in class, and always whenever somebody heard him say it for the first time, their reaction was the same, and it was just fantastic. Definitely a brilliant teacher. That part of the episode made me smile because of that memory. We also have a great exchange between Jake and Alan, which is pretty entertaining. And then Berta is looking for Charlie, but Alan says he lives here too, he can help her out, and Berta says, fine, I need to stay here because my brother is staying at my place. And Alan decides that he lives there too, so he can make a decision. Berta doesn't need to go to Charlie, and Alan says, kind of reluctantly, that Berta can stay there. In the next scene, Berta is sitting on the sofa reading, a magazine. Charlie comes down the stairs and he's really nice to Berta, really positive to her, tells her she's always welcome, and then he goes into the kitchen and thwacks Alan, which is pretty entertainingly done. And actually there are a few times in this where the funny things we don't see, they happen off screen, and I just think it's so brilliantly done. And then we get something that I think is quite eye-opening and probably quite, on the one hand, hurtful, but on the other I kind of understand, which is contradictory, I know. But Alan learns that Charlie thinks he doesn't have any rights to the place, to the house. Not in terms of ownership, but in terms of decision-making, because Alan lives there rent-free. But he has lived there for a number of years. So Alan thinks that means he should have some say in what goes on, in the decisions they make, whereas Charlie thinks you don't pay rent, you don't get a say. And I'm on both of their sides. I feel like if somebody does not contribute financially, and Alan doesn't really contribute in any other way because Berta does all of the house cleaning, then you're not really entitled to a say. But at the same time, if you've lived somewhere for several years, then it would hurt to find out that you apparently have no say in anything. So I understand where both of them are coming from. And Berta decides to take great advantage of this situation, I believe, for no real advantage other than to wind them up. Partly, we see her trying to live in the house, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I feel like mostly she's just having fun with them. And if one of them ended up letting her stay there full time, then I feel like that was just an added bonus for Berta. She tells Alan that it's criminal that Charlie treats him like a second-class citizen, and Alan decides he's going to go and tell Charlie that he is demanding privileges. And of course, Charlie's in the kitchen. He can hear all of this. And Alan goes through, and again, off camera, Charlie thwacks him. The next thing we see is Berta sunbathing. It's a very brief scene, but very well done. I rather enjoyed it. And Charlie wants to talk to her about boundaries. And immediately Berta completely agrees with him. Boundaries are important. That's why she would never tell Charlie anything that Alan says. And of course, Charlie immediately wants to know what Alan has been saying, and Berta is just playing with both of them. Not for the first time, we do see this quite a few times, but certainly in this episode, it is rather abundant. A little while later, we're then around the dinner table. Jake is making jokes. In fact, he's making what he calls dinner conversation, because he is making conversation, not even jokes, he's just sharing facts about sweet corn. And then Charlie comes in and he finds out that there's not enough meatloaf for him. Alan hasn't made enough meatloaf. And as Charlie pointed out, he used his oven. So Alan really should have made a little bit more as well for Charlie. But Alan is obviously trying to show Charlie that if he doesn't have a say around here, he doesn't need to do these things. And Alan decides he's going to move out. And Jake is going with him, but Jake is not very happy about this. And the next thing we know, Alan is looking at properties with Evelyn, and Berta is also sitting at the table, and she doesn't really say much to poke the bear, but I feel like just her presence there was helping to move the situation forward. and Alan goes off with Evelyn to look at places, and Charlie is looking after Jake. And he goes to talk with Jake, but Jake is mad because he doesn't want to move out and he feels like Charlie is forcing them to. And he asks Charlie to explain, and Charlie explains that they're both teaching each other a lesson, Charlie and Alan. And Jake points out that it just sounds ridiculous, and he's absolutely right. And I think the fact that we have a young child here recognizing that both of the grown-ups are just behaving ridiculously, I think is really telling. Eventually, though, off they go, and then when they come back, Alan's bags are packed, and he's packed Jake's bags as well. And Alan is walking very slowly out of the house, and Charlie then says, Alan, and immediately Alan is grovelling, begging Charlie to let him stay. And when I watched this, I thought Alan was waiting for Charlie to say something, and that's what caused him to turn around and start begging. But after he finished begging, only then did it occur to Alan that Charlie was going to say something. So that doesn't actually seem to be the case. It just seems to be, I guess, perfect timing for both of them. And Charlie shuts the door on Alan because he's just talking, and Charlie goes to mention Philip to Berta, and we learn there that Philip doesn't exist. Philip is not staying at Berta's house. This was all just some strange attempt to stay at Charlie's house for a bit. And then we end, of course, with the rather entertaining scene of Alan in the apartment that he was going to be staying at. And when you see it, I think it's fair to understand why then he was begging Charlie to stay, because it's not nice. It's right next to the airport. I understand the way he behaved. It's a really good episode. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. Some really great moments. Some really great comedic moments off screen as well, which is very effective. And we have, obviously, some great moments with Berta as well. Your dismissive attitude towards Boobs is definitely an enjoyable episode of 2.5 Men.